Awareness, the final frontier. This is Awareness Explorers.
Welcome back, fellow explorers, to Awareness Explorers. I'm your co-host, Jonathan, and I'm with my friend and co-host,
Brian Tom O'Connor.
And I am very much looking forward to our interview today, Brian, because I met Michael McCord at a Zen Center in the Bay Area of San Francisco, and I thought he was a great speaker. And you might not know this, Brian, but I almost became a Zen monk 45 years ago.
Wow.
At a place where Michael actually is the president, a place called Tassajara Zen Center. But right before leaving for that center, I met my spiritual teacher and spent the next 26 years with him. So it's an interesting story, and we might get into that. But let me first introduce our guest, Michael McCord. He became the president of San Francisco Zen Center in July of 2024. Before that, he had been in executive management at a global bank, managing managers in an organization with many moving parts. Michael first came to the City Center for Zazen in 2007, then attended an introduction to Buddhism class. He later moved to Tassajara Zen Center, where he studied for 6 years and began what has turned out to be a 15-year student stay. Michael received lay ordination in 2011 and was ordained as a priest by his teacher, Paul Haller, in 2014. I look forward to asking you a bunch of questions, Michael. Welcome to Awareness Explorers.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. I look forward to seeing how this unfolds, and looks like you've got quite an interesting podcast going here for a number of years, so I'm just lucky to be a part of it.
Yeah, so I heard you at Green Gulch Zen Center, and you did a great talk. And one of the things I really liked about it was you were talking about really how to bring Zen into work and life, not just on the cushion. I'm wondering how maybe that, I know you teach a class called Zen at Work and you do leadership stuff. How did that focus start to develop in you of really reaching out to how to bring this into daily life?
Yeah. Well, I think that when I first came to Zen from the corporate space, I didn't have an intention of staying here. I was going to do something for 3 months, maybe a year, and then go back out. I kept re-upping, and after a period of time, I kept realizing that so many of the things that I was learning in the monastery were so applicable to where I had come from. And because a lot of folks who come to Zen and are in, let's say, the role of a priest don't typically, not always, there are some exceptions, but don't typically have, let's say, a lengthy corporate background. The mindset isn't as much of how those things might be applied to using mobile phones, working with Zoom, scheduling meetings, different structures of the organization, greed, hate, and delusion as it's applied to the normal workspace. And I just felt really compelled. And Canon Do is a Sangha that is in the South Bay here near San Jose. I think they're in Mountain View, and they have they were founded by someone who studied underneath Suzuki Roshi, the founder of this temple, or these 3 temples, Tassajara, Green Gulch, and City Center, named Les Kay. And he was an executive at IBM for 30 years, and he wrote the Zen at Work book back in the late 70s or early 80s, and founded a Sangha while he never quit his day job. And eventually they had really good funding. They still have a beautiful Zendo there and a thriving community. And they used to come to Tassajara each year. And a lot of them were in the tech space, biotech space, what have you. And I started talking with them one summer back in 2012. And I realized how much there was as far as an interest in what we were doing in the monastery. So long story short, that was the spark. And I think ever since then, it's just been a series of awarenesses of how these things can be shared.
Yeah. Um, in your talk that I heard, you were, talking about things that normally I don't think a Zen priest is talking about, pizza, smartphones, daily life stress. How do you see, a lot of people think of Zen when they think of it being on a cushion looking at a wall for many hours a day. How do you look at Zen and its integration into daily life?
Yeah, the um, the modern view of Zen, being Zen as a verb, or is someone who's doing something very slowly, single-mindedly, um, no noise, and they just appear really serene and calm. Years ago, Zen Center helped found Green's Restaurant here in San Francisco. I think it's the oldest continually operated vegetarian restaurant in the city. And when we first opened that restaurant back in I think it was 1979, a lot of the students used to go up there and bust dishes. And the newer students that were still having Zen in their mindset would go up there and each plate, in the tub, And after a couple of days, we had, I wasn't there at the time, but the people telling me the story said that they had to get all the people together and say, look, Zen means doing what the moment is asking for. It means meeting the moment. And if the house is on fire, that means you're running out of the house. If you're in a situation that requires a different speed, it's about learning the gearbox and how do I hone the willingness to have a nimble gearbox to shift between the different gears that life is asking of me. And in the monastery, because it's where you have most of the scaffolding to do the work so that you can actually see the formal practice, it is a little bit slower. It is a little bit more intentional continuously. But the modern world doesn't work that way. And so the thought is, how do you start to take that monastery out to bussing dishes, And how do you, do that? So there is a bridge that needs to be talked about, which is Zen isn't designed as a weekend hobby. So you go to the monastery and then you get some Zen. It's designed as the practice place. You have a practice place for practicing the violin. You have a practice place for practicing basketball. But that's not where it takes place. It takes place on the stage, real time. It unfolds. And so you might slow things down in practice in basketball and figure out how you're going to do it. But life happens real time. Now, that said, it doesn't mean that the speed that people move, especially here in the Bay Area, is maybe the best speed to move. A lot of times what people learn, and when I work a lot with executives in the Bay Area and also people that are, in the AI space, and this whole thought of, moving as quickly as you can with making the fewest number of mistakes elicits a certain type of awareness. What you find in the monastery is that by slowing it down, different speeds have different awarenesses. And if you only have one speed that you work at, you find that you're great at fourth gear and that's where you want to live, you will have a certain amount of success. But over the long term, you will probably get more done maybe in a day, but less done in a year, because your awareness will be limited to what that gear can offer. And so what the monastery is really doing is helping people hone their gut over time, realizing what gear is appropriate for what's in front of me. And to do that, oftentimes in the monastery, you have to slow things down in order to get some awareness of that. But it's not the destination. It's just the practice place.
Great metaphor. Brian, I want to give you a chance.
Sure, I was fascinated by a couple of videos. I was fascinated by the fact that you ran a restaurant, and you had a couple of videos about the Tenzo Kyokun, instructions for the cook. And I love that, especially when you talked about, three ways to be at work: joyful mind, parental mind, and magnanimous mind. And I thought maybe if we dove into that, it would be real useful for our listeners.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite subjects. Jonathan, I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
No, no, that sounds like a great inquiry.
Um, the The Tenzo Kyokun, written in the 13th century by the founder of this school of Zen. Zen is a type of Buddhism, and Soto is the sect of Zen that San Francisco Zen Center is. And the founder of that school, Eihei Dogen, um, wrote a guide. It's about a 15, 16-page guide on instructions to the cook. And it is essentially the first step off of the cushion. How do you, in the monastery, do a very functional task that has an end result that you need to meet 3 times a day, and yet not have it simply be about the end result? And so this is, in a sense, addressing the question that's in front of everyone that has a modern job, which is you need to have results. If you don't have results, you don't have a job. So how do you do that without the results being what drives you? Or let's say drives you in a way where it's always a means to an end. And that's what the instructions to the cook are about, is that, you start in the very beginning of the Tenzo Kyokun talking about joyful mind and what supports, having joy. There's things that are missing in our society oftentimes that are pushed aside because they seem inefficient. You see people, for instance, bowing at an altar. Now, we can take what you find in maybe Christian religions or Western religions and put that on top of Zen. I didn't want to bow in front of Zen altars for a long time because I was like, I'm not a woo-woo person. I don't bow in front of altars. I'm not really into iconography. But then I realized one time when a teacher was giving a talk, he said, I want you to come before you ask a question, and I want you to bow 3 times in front of me. And I was like, okay, now you're really pushing the envelope, Yeah. But after seeing people do it and him kind of demonstrating what he was doing, kind of using hyperbole or exaggeration for effect, it is for the bower. It is for the person that is venerating, if you will. The process of venerating something does something for you. So joyful mind, why do you lose joy in a relationship? Why do you lose joy in a workspace? Because things were a means to an end for too long. Because you didn't heart connect to the things and appreciate them in a way on a daily basis that kept the beating heart of now alive. And it really over time just became about the end result. So he starts off with joyful mind. If you can't have joyful mind about cooking in the kitchen, and what is it that brings you back to that? And he gives many examples. So I usually challenge people that have, a tech job. I have a student that runs an AI company, and he founded it while he was living at Zen Center. And I ask him, what is it that connects you to why it is you do what you do? Then you move into parental mind, or kind of like your very careful mind. He says treating the vegetables as though they are your own eyeballs. If we skip through and just take our mobile phones, I mean, the iPhone 17, you can just, you could have ruled the world 40 years ago with this thing, and now we just shove them in our back pocket and throw them on our bed and all the rest of it. How do you take that and learn to have appreciation for an object? To learn to, if everything is treated that way and nothing is treated like an old world artisan treats their tools, then you don't develop an appreciation. If you're not careful with anything, if everything is move quickly and break things, then you don't, really appreciate people. You skip through people. You start treating relationships that way. And then if your relationships are that way, if the objects in your life are that way, if everything is disposable, if everything is meant to be efficient, then all of a sudden you find yourself not having the last mind, which is called magnanimous mind or big mind. And it's essentially the result of living and working with the other two on a continuous basis. You have a broad view of holding things. And so that Tenzo Kyokun, the instructions to the cook, can be taken and put on top of any work environment, any relationship, but it helps people be able to engage what they're doing without it being a means to an end, and keeps their heart in what they're doing. So I usually use the Tenzo Kyokun and that bridge as usually a first step to talking about how we move from the practice place to where somebody is executing in their job.
I'd love to read that. Hopefully, we can find and put a link to that. I realize, when you talked about appreciating things and taking good care of them, a few weeks back, my computer broke. And, I treat the computer kind of like, an object, throw it around, this and that. When it broke, then I realized my entire life, or large parts of my life, are dependent on it. And since getting it back, I'm more like, precious, don't throw it around. I say thank you. And it really creates a different relationship. Of course, that efficiency factor can get into every relationship, with our partner, our kids, and it's kind of like our modern disease. And I'm wondering, are there practices that you give to people, or is it more of just the understanding of the damage that comes from our fast-paced, irreverent minds?
Yeah, no, great question. And my answer is definitely yes. We are constantly looking for practices, because if you go to the monastery, you have all these practices that help ground you. And the first thing that we, do in the monastery is we try to ground. We try to be present. And, sometimes you might try to be present, but you're not present, and everyone knows that phenomenon. In the daily life, you need similar scaffolding, because without having tangible things, this is where I think that the future of Zen really is for a lot of the Western world. What are the tangible things that are going to emulate what it is that you find in the monastery, that had to do with where I'm actually living and breathing. So, for instance, in the monastery, I might have given this example when I was doing the talk at Green Gulch a few weeks ago, but in the monastery, there's a shingi, a document of shared agreements of how we will live, and they had to do with Zen practices. But they're all designed around helping a person be aware of their behavior and be aware of their body and be aware of their emotions. So before you go into the bathroom, there's these little altars outside the bathroom, and they're called gatas. And before you go into the bathroom, you're supposed to stop and just pause and bow. When are you more impatient than when you need to use the restroom? Just come back to your body for 3 seconds and bow. And then when you drink water, you're asked to pick up the water with, I've got this water bottle here, but you're asked to, pick it up with 2 hands, always 2 hands. So usually you touch the bottom of it, and then you drink from your water bottle. And you never stand while drinking. You sit down and you give water respect. And so this brings you back to just, it's a little practice. So I tell some folks, I say, well, the thing that you're going to interact with most, I think, probably over the course of your work week is going to be your mobile phone. So how about for the next month, you take the case off of your mobile phone? And every time you pick it up, you're going to pick it up with 2 hands. And then you're going to use it, but you're always going to put 2 hands on it. And then you're going to decide where that phone lives at work, and you're going to decide where it lives at home, and you're going to decide where it lives in your bag or whatever. And that's where it goes. It's its home, And to start to find a way that you bring attention to the objects the way that you would in the monastery. And over time, these practices, I'll list probably 5 or 6, but I encourage people to do an experiment with their home and with their life. If you never do anything as an old world artisan and everything is done, in 4th gear as quickly as you can, you never gain other awarenesses and you don't really ground. The aggregate is not something that works, even if you get some efficiency. So a lot of students, I say, when, people, and especially the folks I work, a lot of them are type A's that get up and want to, conquer the world. And so I say, the first thing I want you to do when you get out of bed is I want you to spend 3 minutes making your bed like an old world artisan. And if anything pops into your mind about, like when you get up, you've got that whole, morning mind and everything's popping, don't think about email. If something pops into your mind, it's just like you're meditating. You don't own it. You don't push it away. You don't add a molecule to it. You don't analyze it. Everything that gets your attention is your bed. And you get the sheets and you make it, you make it slower. Do it at 75% speed. You can do it at 100% speed. Do it at 75% speed. No music, no podcast, no coffee. Get up and make the bed at 75% speed and get that bed, get that sheet like it is in a hotel room, fold it, get the wrinkles out of it. No one's going to see the sheet, but you're going to see the sheet. And then get the blanket, get the comforter, get those pillows fluffed, and then pull them tight, and then tuck the ends of them around so they're nice little squares, and make the whole thing beautiful, and do it at 75% speed. And these sort of things, that literally is making a bed as a meditation. And you can't do everything all throughout your day that way. That's true. But if you don't have some things at home and some things at work that you do that way, then you're never going to actually experience other gears intentionally, especially if you move like most people do in the modern world, which is as fast as you can without making mistakes. And then maybe you go take a breather in a park like once a day and, go back to first gear or something. But there's also third gear and there's also second gear and, and also feeling like you're getting done in those gears. I encourage people with the mobile phone to do a fast. If you never have a half day, at least a week where you don't use this thing, it's always going to rule you. And you can design your life around that. I have students all over the world. I'm the president of an organization, and I turn this thing off for at least half a day once a week. And I don't keep it with me. I turn it off. I stick it in a drawer. And people just know that if something happens, you're going to have to find me. But I've set it up that way. I've talked to everybody about it. They know what happens. And there are ways for key people who know me if there's an emergency where they know how to get in touch with me. But and in fact, there's now a setting on the iPhone that you can have it's called personalized time. And so I set it up where like 3 people can actually get through if there's something that happens. And so oftentimes I'll keep the phone with me, but it'll be on personalized time, and then nothing else can come through. And then I don't look at, anything. And if I got to navigate somewhere, I'll just use a map, But being able to, Cal Newport in his book, Deep Work, really, I think probed into something that's very analogous to a lot of these daily habits that are very much aligned with Zen in regard to having a relationship with technology. And we all know that if you have a romantic relationship or a family relationship and you don't have good boundaries, you don't have shared agreements for how we're going to function together, the relationship is awful. And it just doesn't go well. But yet people have a relationship with something that's incredibly powerful, and they've never actually set their boundaries, figured out what their agreements are, what apps are allowed to come forward. I have almost no apps on my phone that are allowed to come forward. I have to go to it. And, I also have the Apple Watch, don't mean to be pumping Apple here. There's many other good competitors, not paid by Apple. But again, it has a little haptic thing that happens. Does the watch, can it just come forward anytime it wants? No, I make myself go to it, and then I leave the screen black. You can do the theater mode where you turn it off, and then the whole screen is black constantly. And then if you want to see it, I have to touch the screen. And I found so far that's working for me. I'm not certain if I'm going to keep my Apple Watch. I've had it for about 5 years. I'm working with the relationship. We're figuring out how it goes. But these things, as AI steps into our life, the more we have Alexas in our kitchen and things like this, we have to figure out those relationships. We can't just absorb them. So I realized at one point in time that I had a very bad relationship with my Alexa. And the relationship was abusive, essentially, because it was a machine, and I didn't really treat it like with any respect. If I wanted something, I would set the timer for 2 minutes. You know, tell me what thus and such. I was always barking at it. Um, and then I realized, I feel that in my body. I'm actually having a relationship with this thing, and I'm treating it like I would treat, a cadet at the Air Force Academy, and that's kind of how I just barked at it all the time. So I just eventually started saying, please. I would say, Alexa, please set the timer for 2 minutes and 30 seconds while I'm cooking, or I'd say, Alexa, could you please find the latest NPR, whatever, and trying to work on my tone. There's so many things in regard to the corporate space too that we could get into in regard to how we set meetings. And I set meetings that are 5 to 7 minutes apart because I live on a hill, and I figured out that I need to walk between meetings. I can't sit at my desk for 2.5 hours. It's not good for my back. It's not good for my mind. So it takes me 5.5 minutes to walk around this block in San Francisco. I'm on a hill. It gets my blood pumping. I come back to my desk. Sometimes the meeting runs over. I only got 2.5 minutes. That's great. I've got a yoga mat. I put it down on the floor. I plank for 2 minutes. Then I go back and then I do my next meeting. I know if I don't have my day like that, and if I don't have my water bottle, I'm not going to stay hydrated. And if I don't have, I do meeting interruptions on purpose, where I push the meeting back 10 minutes and I write a thank you card to somebody because I know that I'm just getting wound and myopic. This is our little incubator, if you will, to figure out how Zen works off the cushion. Is kind of I guess you'd say, the administrative offices of Zen. And I could go on and on, but I'll just stop there.
Yeah. Well, I love your analogy of I think you used the word scaffolding, that you have various firewalls and rituals throughout the day that interrupt the mechanical, efficient mind that tends to go faster and faster. And the whole thing about a relationship with our technology is not something I've heard about, from other people. It's so important because in some ways that's the most important relationship we have now. We're constantly, we're on technology now. What's my relationship with Zoom? It is more of like, do this for me, and when it breaks down, we're devastated. Like, what'd you do? It didn't work. So these little things like picking up your phone with two hands and appreciating it, it creates a mindset that's very different than our normal mindset. I really appreciate those practical tools. Brian, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. And as a matter of fact, one of my questions was, how does reverence build joy? And you've really answered that so well. I had a similar practice because by nature I'm sort of an irreverent person, and so when I hear the word reverence, I think that somehow it's religious or something. But I just use the term appreciation. And I find it very similar to what you're describing. If I am using my phone, I'm saying, wow, this is actually an amazing thing. If I'm watching sports on television, I say, this is so amazing, all the effort and skill that went into it, from the players to the cameramen to the people who run the food stands. And so I like appreciation that works for me, but I really do think we're talking about something very similar.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought when you mentioned what I think you call gatas, which might be kind of like reminders maybe for things. I thought a better word might be gotchas. Like you forgot it again. Here, remember to appreciate your toilet or whatever it is. But how do you I've noticed when I try to do some of these things, they quickly become mechanical. Not always. Like I was at an Adyashanti retreat, and he had us bowing to our chair. And I went through various stages. It was a week-long retreat. First, like, screw you. Why am I bowing to a chair? Kind of that. And then by day three, it was kind of, oh yeah, this is really a special chair that I can quiet and go deep within, and really feeling that reverence. By day six, it was already mechanical, like, yeah, bowing to the chair. Okay, let me sit down. So I went through the entire relationship in a week, and I'm wondering what hints you might have to help people if they do some of these practices, how to make sure that they don't become just a mechanical activity.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's the kind of the maturity of practice that is um, the question in front of everyone once they have digested a lot of the practice. Because you can use anything as an escape, including Zen. And what's happening on the outside might not be what's happening on the inside. And you can look like a monk that's sitting meditation and bowing at the appropriate times and all the rest of it, and still not really be there. I would, as a caveat, say that some of your very senior teachers still can kind of tell. It's quite something. But that's the question in front of everyone is, and it illuminates something that's very important, which is the act itself is the scaffolding. You don't worship the scaffolding. It is just there to elicit the where you are in your body and mind. It's there to summon that and to help it. But if you end up worshiping the scaffolding, then the whole purpose of the scaffolding is lost. So that's the question. Once practice matures, is how do I bring it back? And for each person, it's an ongoing experiment. What does just skipping through the gata before the restroom, and there's so many things in the monastery that, the first couple of years, you're just like trying to memorize everything, but then after you do, you very easily can just do those 250 things throughout the day and be doing it while you're just ruminating over stuff, and that's the question in front of everyone. Sometimes, for me, it's about slowing it down. Sometimes it's intentional noticing. Really noticing, my hand position when I'm bowing. Hands tend to, when you do like a bow, thumbs always want to do this, or fingers want to do that. But when you bow, it's actually not, tracing Thanksgiving turkey like you did in fifth grade, but it's actually like beauty queen hands. Let this tight. Thumbs always want to do this, hold them in. And then elbows, need to be at a certain position, that it's not military and it's not floppy. And then, it's almost like if you do Tai Chi, and you do it with a master, you have all these body movements and you think you're doing it right. And they're like, okay, this is, so, there's infinite ways you can bring yourself to the body, to the breath, to noticing, just the attitude that I have. Like, what is my attitude right now? Humans are never neutral. I always have a lens. What is my lens right now? What's my filter? What is the water that I'm used to swimming in? Like I like to read the New Yorker magazine. I think it's great. And yet I will put it down every 6 to 8 months because I will end up just reading the New Yorker and then it will become my perspective. And I realize it has a lens, it has a view, and it is not a perfect view. And I had a friend one time I said that to who was not a Zen practitioner. And he said, oh, I've agreed with everything I've read in the New Yorker for 30 years. And I said, that's dangerous. So we always have a lens that's going on. And so there's many things you can do in experiment to bring yourself back to to try to notice either what's the water that I'm swimming in where I don't notice the water, I'm just a fish. What is it that I'm doing with my body that I'm, so these rituals are, building personal rituals can be very powerful in regard to like setting up an altar. I never used to want to set up an altar. I wasn't an altar person, and then I had an experience with a teacher, Reb Anderson, and I was going to be meeting this person in my family who I hadn't seen in years, and we had this ongoing argument, and then this other thing had happened between us remotely that really made me upset. And when I was going to see them in about a month or two, I didn't know how I was going to handle myself because I just basically felt resentment and rage toward them. And I said this to Reb, and he said, put their name on your altar. I said, I don't have an altar. And he said, well, make an altar. And so as a curious Zen student, I was like, all right, I'll do a scientific experiment. And so, he said, put their name on your altar, get something that's living and breathing like a flower, put it on your altar. And then I want you to bow in front of that altar for three times every morning. And then I want you to sit in front of that altar, and I want you to either, if you got a picture of that person, put the picture on the altar, and if not, just put the name, and I want you to wish them well for 2 minutes. I hope that person's dreams come true. I hope they have a long life. I hope they feel empowered. I hope that, wish someone well for 2 minutes, And, the first couple of days, it felt like chewing glass. It was really, really hard to execute that. But what I found is that I was now utilizing the altar in a personal way that helped me work with humility. The bowing itself, was a humbling exercise. Wishing someone well, I mean, that doesn't mean that I think they're right. It doesn't mean that I think that they're a good person. I'm not saying, that this person's behavior needs to be copied. All I'm doing is I'm respecting their humanity, and I'm connecting to them as a person. And I'm using an altar as a way to actually help me. And so these personal rituals, the more personal they are, the easier they are to not have them be rote, and to be constantly bringing them back to what is it that my heart is connected to? What is it that I can infuse my life with that brings me back to my heart? That's what will keep the rituals themselves, incredibly powerful. Bowing to your chair. When you bow to your chair, like they were having you do in that workshop, you could, if it's an office chair, it could be, bowing to the chair and then thinking of the reason that you had this job. Or it could be the person who inspired you and was a mentor. Or it could be the, whatever, and then try to bring something, so personalizing those rituals and then being honest and really doing a review of what I'm skipping through on a regular basis is essential.
Yeah, great. Right.
Now, all these that you've described seem so wonderful for helping a person in their lives lead a life that's more joyous, more peaceful, more equanimity, more effectiveness. But what's the relationship between improving the way you live life and enlightenment? I don't know what the Zen term is for enlightenment, but I assume that would be part of the teaching.
Yeah. So enlightenment could be mini enlightenments, if you will, seeing through certain delusions that I have about myself, the universe, etc. Ultimate enlightenment, if you will, would be seeing the harmony between all things and seeing the truth, capital T, in all moments. I think if the latter happens to a person, they probably would just turn into a pure beam of light and disappear. I don't know. But I do think that enlightenment um, sometimes in different practices has been equated to samadhi, a type of enlightened state in meditation of being able to have an expanded awareness and a dropping away of self and seeing the connectedness of myself and the universe, similar to what some people have experienced on acid trips. But that said, I think Jack Kornfield wrote a really good book about that, which was something, I forget the exact title, but it was like Today Enlightenment, Tomorrow the Laundry.
Or
Um,
after the
and
ecstasy, the laundry, I think is what it's called.
yeah, exactly. And it goes through about, being in places where you have like a 7-day sit, having some things that you see through, having some samadhi experiences, and yet then coming back to the mundane and realizing that a lot of times people approach the spiritual path as seeking a certain state almost accidentally, like they're searching for autopilot, and that the actual spiritual path is about embracing the fact that as a human being, you go up and down and you have mild depression or discouragement or loneliness or what have you. The enlightened piece of that is how you hold those things and embrace those things, not as though the universe is broken, but as though I am a part of the universe, and being able to do that without having to force it so much. So there is an enlightened path, if you will, that is something that I think is ever growing in people. And sometimes people say that this person was enlightened or that person was enlightened. In the Zen tradition, a person would never declare themselves enlightened, because they would be living through and realizing their delusion. That would be the enlightenment, if you will, in that moment, is realizing the delusion that I am in. And it's not as though someone arrives at a state, but though there is an ever increasing awareness, and not monotonically increasing, to pull from a college math term of increasing without decreasing, but increasing and decreasing and increasing and decreasing, but hopefully over time the aggregate is increasing, in awareness through the practice that we're going through. And those awarenesses can have heightened, I guess you'd say, aha moments of seeing through my delusion. And that's typically what we would talk about in Zen, would be things that I have seen through, or things that I am currently turning over that I don't, see through. Mm-hmm. That said, in Soto Zen, the Bodhisattva path is something that is talked about a lot. And the Bodhisattva is one that is approaching the subject of enlightenment as something that is a fruit of practice, but not a goal. It is something that happens because of the setup of how I am living, but it's not something that I'm charting like a do A and get B. It's something that I'm noticing that, of course, if I'm doing a practice and over time things aren't improving, maybe I need to alter the practice. But that the intention would be to, if enlightenment, let's say, is on the other side of a wall, would be to climb up on the wall and then to not be jumping over the wall, but sitting up there and helping other people up. So that the practice itself is practicing so that I can help other people see through their delusions. And that would actually be the most enlightened thing a person could do.
I know in Zazen, there's a major focus on watching the breath. And I'm wondering how you might use the breath during the day. Do you do, 10 seconds focusing on here, 3 minutes there? Or is it more that's a practice when just sitting in meditation?
Yeah, I think you can bring yourself back to the breath at any time throughout the day. Many times I do. I call it anchoring myself in something I know is happening, as opposed to the memories of the past or my projections on the future. Um, and as you said, it's something that we use in Zazen. It's also something that we don't use in Zazen, in the sense that in the school of Zen, you have shikantaza, which is just sitting, and then you also have breath practice. So breath practice as sitting would be literally a meditation, i.e., you are meditating on something. You are specifically putting your mind on your breath. And that usually is something that folks start with in the monastery in order to build concentration and to build the capacity to be with something in the present and only the present. That said, the thing that Eihei Dogen brought to Soto Zen was just sitting, which is not focusing on the breath and just allowing, almost like you're looking at a crowd, but not looking at one person. You're just sitting with all the phenomenon that's me, mental formations, body sensations, and letting them all come forward. And sometimes I will just intentionally in Zazen return to the breath and count my breath, But throughout the day, I think there's many times that the breath can be used as a very powerful anchor.
Brian, you had a question.
I loved how you described seeing that the universe isn't broken. And it reminded me of emotions, because a lot of people feel when they have a strong emotion or a so-called unwanted emotion that there's something about them or the world that's broken that needs to be fixed. And so they're looking for a strategy not to have the emotion. And they're also ignoring the fact that emotions are in the body and then can be felt. So what are your tips for people who are dealing with strong emotion that they may not like?
Yeah. Well, on a continuum, of course, on the far end, you have very acute, negative, powerful, destructive emotions that people probably need to seek psychiatric or professional help with. But on a daily, just sort of your normal ebb and flow, mild depression, loneliness, sadness. These are things that oftentimes are talked about as things you need to immediately find a button to push to get out of, and rather than just being with the thing itself, we can through self-help, and I'm a big fan of self-help. I think it's great to find tips and tricks to work with your life. But if you always are looking for a button to push when you're feeling a little bit lonely, and you never really just feel lonely and go about, as though nothing's wrong, you're subtly going to war with yourself and saying that those parts of me are not acceptable, or that they're things that need to be suppressed. And, while you might not fire up and increase loneliness intentionally, as it's manifesting, it is something that I need to learn how to let myself feel it in my body. And, loneliness, sadness, depression, mild worry. If I always have to do some self-help tip or trick, then, I don't really experience the full range of who I am as a person.
Yeah. I know you have limited time, Michael. Is there anything that you want to say before we do a brief guided meditation that we may not have covered that you want to make sure you talk about?
Sure. I think that the thing that's really important is that there is, at the root of Zen is an acceptance practice. And what people are doing when they're sitting on the cushion and looking at the wall is an acceptance practice of they're letting themselves come forward. So when we sit, we don't have a goal, like I'm going to sit and I'm going to calm down. You can use sitting for that, but that's a lower level of sitting, if you will. A higher level of sitting, if you can put them into a higher gear, what have you, would be to sit and to let what's coming forward, my sadness, my anxiety, my what have you, without adding to it or analyzing it. Literally just letting what is coming forward come forward, but not to, I was in a meeting, let's say 3 weeks ago, and Steve said that thing. And now I'm sitting zazen, and like that thing that Steve said popped into my head. I noticed the twinge in my chest. I had the mental vision of being in that meeting and seeing Steve. That's all that's happened. And so now I'm sitting with that, and I'm feeling that uncomfortable feeling. But I'm not analyzing Steve and why Steve's that way and projecting on Steve and thinking about how his mother probably was or whatever. I'm just feeling the feeling in the body, and I'm noticing what came forward. And so I'm sitting right between analyzing everything or suppressing everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's right in between those two things that I'm sitting. That is pure acceptance of what is actually manifesting. Through getting in touch with what's manifesting for me as a person, I get to know me, and I'm less afraid of what is inside because I don't have to color things to make them prettier or explain them or make myself the hero, and I don't have to push them away like I can't handle them. I can just literally let the body sensation be what it is, learn how to hold my, anger towards Steve. I notice I handle it, I hold it in my chest and my triceps. And I sit there and I don't analyze it, and I'm outside of language. I'm literally just noticing a somatic, and letting that mental formation happen of, and through that, it's humans have been noticing this since there were humans, like Plato's allegory of the cave, exact same time as kind of being written as when the Buddha was in the Indo-Gangetic plain talking about his stuff. If you look at the monster and you have the courage to not just sit there and tell stories about what's around the cave wall, like in Plato's allegory, there's a calming and there is a settledness that happens to the psyche where I'm not having to live in story time or my delusion, but just literally looking at it. So this is acceptance practice. And it's not approval practice, but it's just being with the thing that's coming up, and I'm being with it. And then as it's coming up, how do I hold it? Do I hold it like approval, disapproval? No, you hold it like you hold a small baby. Because that's how a baby matures. You take a baby to the grocery store, it starts crying because you're in the frozen food section, and they're stirred up. You can't explain to a baby and talk to a baby about the logic of freezers and fans and what have you. All you can do is rock the baby because you're outside of logic. You're just talking about fear. Our emotions that come forward in the same sort of way are actually in the same place. You can't reason yourself into feeling a different way. So you learn how to hold yourself when you're sitting or when you're going through the day. The very first micro reaction you're training yourself to do by doing that sitting practice, so that when you're in that meeting and Steve says that thing, you're learning to how to notice that anger arise, and then how do I hold it? The next thing that happens, pure acceptance. I'm not approving of it. I'm not pushing it away. I just learn how to hold that body feeling. And so that's kind of the arc of sitting and learning how to be with what's sitting, and then learning how to be in our daily life with our spouses or partners or family or coworkers, and then noticing ourselves, because we know ourselves so much better through our sitting practice, that we can learn to hold what's happening with pure acceptance. If we can do that for ourselves, then we have the opportunity for it slowly to start to spill out for us to accept others.
What a beautiful summary. Thank you.
Right. I wonder if you could guide us in a brief meditation before you leave. And thank you so much, Michael. Great answers. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Honored to be here. And thank you so much for being gracious hosts. So most folks are probably seated in a chair. If folks watch this and are seated on the floor, you just want to have your behind on a cushion on the front half with your pelvis tilted forward. If you're seated in a chair, usually you want to come away from the back of the chair and sit on the front of it. And if it's possible to bring it high enough that your hips are a little bit higher than your knees, that's perfect. And then knees would be about a little bit more than shoulder width apart. And then we would just do a slight body scan, and my ears over my shoulders, my nose in alignment with my navel. And in Zen, we keep our eyes open and we keep our mouth closed. Breathe through our nose, teeth and lips shut, tongue against the front roof of the mouth. And then we have a soft gaze looking down 45-degree angle like we're looking at an entire valley, but we're not looking at any flower. Still has energy. It's not sleepy or lazy. It's just not focused. Our front side is completely relaxed. Our chest is relaxed. Our stomach is relaxed. Our spine is completely erect. And we have our hands either on our knees, or you can put them in a mudra or hand position in your lap. I use the cosmic mudra, which is like this. Right hand under left hand, thumb tips barely touching. Let's take a few deep breaths through our nose. And now for the next 2 minutes, let's follow our breath. Let's just count our breath. See if you can follow it and not summon it. Usually when we summon it, we take these deep breaths. But usually when we live, we just take shallow breaths. Let the body breathe naturally. Let's count our breath. Breathe in 1, breathe out 1, breathe in 2, breathe out 2. Go all the way to 10. When you get to 10, go back to 1. If you lose your way, go back to 1. If you aren't sure if you lost your way, then you did. Go back to 1. And just breathe in 1, breathe out 1, breathe in 2, breathe out 2. Let's ground ourselves in something that we know is happening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. If people want to find out more about the San Francisco Zen Center, is there a place to direct them to?
Yeah, they could go to sfzc.org, and there you'll find how to engage in all 3 of our temples in San Francisco's Bay Area, Green Gulch Farm, City Center in the middle of the city, Green Gulch north of the Golden Gate, and Tassajara in the remote wilderness down near Big Sur in Monterey. And also there's online offerings where we actually broadcast a lot of our talks and even many of our sits and classes in our online program section. And all of them can be found on the toolbar when you first log on to sfzc.org.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your way of bringing Zen into the world. I feel like I got a lot of value, and I'm sure our listeners did too.
Yes.
I
Thank
appreciate it, Jonathan and Brian. It's great to spend this time with you.
you too.
Until next time, friends, keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
Thank you for listening to Awareness Explorers. To learn more, you can check out our website at awarenessexplorers.com. please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app. We'd love it if you would post a review. And please share our link on Facebook and with family and friends, because knowing yourself as awareness is the greatest gift you can give yourself or someone you love.